Of Keir Starmer's attacks on freedom of speech.
It's exactly what you'd expect from someone who holds his position. It's nothing new. I think in the UK, things have gone farther in the UK on the, what would you say, with regards to threats to freedom of expression than maybe anywhere in the West, although Canada's doing its best to play catch-up, maybe New Zealand. It's in keeping with his ethos. It's not surprising, and it's
Starmer strolled in expecting a calm discussion, but Jordan Peterson arrived like a blitzkrieg of logic, espresso, and verbal artillery. Within moments, Starmer resembled a buffering AI attempting to explain governance. This wasn't debate, it was a TED Talk colliding with a cage match. And yes, someone brought the metaphorical steel chair. If you've ever wanted to watch a thinker dismantle a politician's entire worldview, this is it. Somewhere amid the haze of Downing Street, Starmer flounders, leading with all the flair of a printer and the passion of tepid tea. Then comes Peterson, not physically, but as a whirlwind of ideas, a human encyclopedia with claws, shredding every fragile thread of Starmer's leadership like a masterclass in strategic self-destruction.
Tells you that Keir Starmer doesn't want a national inquiry into grooming gangs.
No, that doesn't surprise me. It's exactly what you'd expect. I've got an article coming out in the Telegraph this week about exactly that issue, and so it's appalling. Well, there's hard questions that need to be asked about and answered about multiculturalism, and no one's willing to have the discussion, but it needs to be had, obviously. And I think there's maybe a way forward with regards to the signatories of the Abraham Accord, to have a serious discussion about how Islamic fundamentalism might be brought under control and some vision of how.
Imagine Britain as a ship tossed in a raging storm. The crew is in chaos, the compass spinning like it's on caffeine, and at the helm stands Captain Starmer, squinting at a handbook titled Generic Leadership for Dummies, desperately trying to move forward without ruffling feathers. Meanwhile, Jordan Peterson, perched on the safe shores of reason and clarity, is bellowing across the waves, demanding to know if anyone on board has even glanced at a map.
Of morality in Britain that grooming gangs were taking place for more than 3 decades.
You know, that's what happens when a naive, demented, and self-righteous multiculturalism takes the upper hand, and when the upper class is willing to sacrifice the poor to their own moral presumptions. Yeah, it's appalling in every possible way. So, and it indicates, it's indicative of something truly hideous beneath the surface, not only on the rape gang side, but obviously on the side of the authorities that conspired to keep it a secret. Dreadful.
Starmer's identity crisis isn't temporary, it's a full-time gig. One moment he's the progressive hero the public cheers for, the next he's dusting off his centrist credentials like a vintage briefcase. He pivots so often, it's less governing and more interpretive choreography. And make no mistake, this isn't flexibility. It's pure ideological whiplash.
Prediction for the UK election. You've been quite scathing about Sir Keir Starmer, but the polls show at the moment, certainly, if the election happens in the autumn, it seems likely, that he is heading to some kind of victory. What do you think that would mean for Britain? And do the Conservatives have any chance of stopping that?
I think it'll be catastrophic. I believe that Labour, like the socialist parties in Canada, is absolutely overwhelmed by the diversity, equity, and inclusivity, victimizer narrative type.
Jordan Peterson, the man who distills human behavior into a dozen rules and demands accountability from goldfish, would call Starmer's political gymnastics a masterclass in existential avoidance. If clarity were money, Starmer would be flat broke. His policies exist in a Schrodinger's cat state, both present and absent depending on the audience. On the economy, his budgets feel less like a vision and more like a corporate spreadsheet come alive, growth promised, but no engine under the hood, just wishful thinking, token tax tweaks for the middle class, and gentle nods to billionaires. It's the political equivalent of rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, while insisting it's merely ice. Meanwhile, Peterson's focus on competence and structured ambition highlights Starmer's obsession with surface-level stability. He governs as if running a dental clinic, sterile, procedural, and passionless. Under his watch, the economy feels less like a bold new era, and more like a museum of broken calculators and recycled slogans.
even if Starmer himself has any sense, which I doubt, the probability that his minions will lay waste to the UK it's certain in my estimation. There's so much behind the scene tyrannizing going on in the name of hypothetical utopian progress that it's almost unimaginable. I mean, the CCTVs in the ULEZ zones are a great example of that, and everything that's happened in London under Sadiq Khan, who's like poster boy for ideologically addled globalist utopians. And if the Labour gets in, and I can understand why the citizens of the UK are hungry for a change, if Labour gets in, it's like Venezuela, here we come.
On cultural issues, Starmer is so terrified of offending anyone that he's turned Labour into the political equivalent of gluten-free tofu, bland, shapeless, and apologizing for simply existing. He sidesteps cultural debates as if they were radioactive, but pretending they aren't. There is no strategy, unless the goal is to lull voters into submission. Jordan Peterson, by contrast, stands for clarity, conviction, and a moral framework. Starmer acts as if silence can hide the fact that his party's moral compass was left abandoned somewhere near Camden. You can almost hear him mutter, "If I just don't look at reality, maybe it won't ask me tough questions." And then there's his authoritarian streak. Once celebrated as a guardian of party democracy, Starmer now runs Labour like a private club for risk-averse technocrats. Candidate selection has the grassroots input of a North Korean election, and any hint of dissent is swiftly erased. The party's left wing has been wiped out like an old family photo from a bygone era.
Starmer's posturing with regards to adolescence is only going to make that worse. It's bad psychology, and it's not only that, it's also oriented not to help young people, but to make Mr. Starmer feel a hell of a lot more secure in the idiot presumptions of his dimwit progressivism. So, and that's really the fundamental aim. It's like, how can we show we're right? And if we have to burn some young people on the pyre to make sure that our moral presuppositions can remain intact and our faith in our idiocy remains unchallenged, then we might as well teach kids using a Netflix series on.
Contrast that with Jordan Peterson's respect for institutional integrity and decentralized authority. Starmer isn't leading a movement, he's managing a brand, a lifeless, corporate-style brand complete with loyalty cards and mandatory PowerPoint slides. Leadership for him isn't about vision, it's about control. On foreign policy, he doesn't steer, he follows. International summits become cosplay, with Starmer reciting lines from whichever Western ally sent the latest memo. His world affairs stance is driven by optics, not principles, diplomacy by press release, strategy by hashtag. Britain under Starmer isn't being led, it's being micromanaged by a middle manager with delusions of adequacy. Peterson, who champions responsibility and purpose, would likely see Starmer as a case study in ambition without philosophy, a leader without a spine, chasing public approval like a golden retriever after tennis balls, even on matters that demand clarity. Housing reforms drown in red tape, education plans stall under metrics, and climate pledges are worded so cautiously they spare oil donors and suburban car owners alike. Policy under Starmer is governed by risk assessment, not principle.
Your desire to tar anyone who has, as I say, not got a voice and is wanting to make their voice heard as a violent far-right neo-Nazi seems to me to be a big error by Keir Starmer and others. Because, if you can't say, we recognize your deep, deep concerns about some things that have happened, including mass stabbings, terrorism, and much more. We understand your deep, deep concerns, and we are going to try to get onto this and on top of this. But there is no excuse to turn out on the streets and be violent against your Muslim brothers and sisters and neighbors.
Starmer has turned governance into a bland porridge of non-committal strategies, no bite, no soul, just bullet points masquerading as principles. Britain doesn't need a chief manager, it needs a leader with backbone, vision, and ideally, a pulse. Jordan Peterson didn't just intellectually dismantle Starmer, he exposed the illusion that anything substantial ever existed beneath the pressed suit, and rehearsed pauses. Meanwhile, Britain struggles with a health system gasping for air, a housing market playing monopoly on steroids, and a generation inheriting anxiety instead of opportunity. Through it all, Starmer issues statements with the force of a dial tone, and the impact of a damp sponge. Peterson wouldn't even need to raise his voice. Starmer defeats himself, the political equivalent of a ghost-written self-help book full of generalities, terrified of specifics, destined to gather dust. Britain deserves more than a placebo politician. It needs leadership that sparks action, not one that merely manages decline. What Peterson deconstructs with philosophy, Britain endures in reality, leadership reduced to focus-tested slogans, conviction dissolved into administrative neatness. Starmer is what happens when a nation in crisis hires a risk consultant instead of a prime minister.
Somehow navigate us to a better place. Possibly, is he going to be a transformative prime minister where we all wake up in 2-3 years and think, wow, the Starmer revolution? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's better. That's better than it might have been. Well, I spent quite a long time working with Democrats in the US, and I got very disillusioned about that, partly because they showed zero propensity to draw a line between the moderate Democrats and...
Then the Jordan Peterson-shaped intellectual force finally collided with number 10, splattering the walls with cold, hard philosophical reality. No yelling, no theatrics, just calmly dissecting Starmer's leadership like a science fair frog, except this frog has a law degree, a corner office, and zero backbone. Peterson didn't need volume, all he required was a mirror. At the core, Peterson's worldview is radical yet simple: leaders take responsibility. Starmer, by contrast, treats responsibility like radioactive waste. When crises hit, strikes, economic setbacks, policy failures, he disappears behind inquiries, reviews, and endless lessons learned, like a magician fleeing his own vanishing act. Peterson's creed: fix yourself before running a country. Starmer's creed: treat the nation like a group project and hope someone else takes the blame when the PowerPoint crashes. And vision: leaders are meant to chart a future. Starmer guides both party and country with all the visionary spark of a printer manual.
I suspect what'll happen in the UK is the same thing that happened in Canada, which is that the right will split and reform and reunite, and that would be the best bet. Maybe as a coalition government. I'm not staking my, what did you say? Not on either candidate. I've spoken with Nigel Farage and with Kemi Badenoch, and they're both credible people, and they have to fight it out amongst themselves. But I imagine the right will unite eventually again, and hopefully.
Then the Jordan Peterson-shaped intellectual force finally collided with number 10, splattering the walls with cold, hard philosophical reality. No yelling, no theatrics, just calmly dissecting Starmer's leadership like a science fair frog, except this frog has a law degree, a corner office, and zero backbone. Peterson didn't need volume, all he required was a mirror. At the core, Peterson's worldview is radical yet simple: leaders take responsibility. Starmer, by contrast, treats responsibility like radioactive waste. When crises hit, strikes, economic setbacks, policy failures, he disappears behind inquiries, reviews, and endless lessons learned, like a magician fleeing his own vanishing act. Peterson's creed: fix yourself before running a country. Starmer's creed: treat the nation like a group project and hope someone else takes the blame when the PowerPoint crashes. And vision: leaders are meant to chart a future. Starmer guides both party and country with all the visionary spark of a printer manual.